Hi all, today we will be discussing image analysis, specifically in the context of the Year 12 English curriculum. Now, as you can see here, this skill forms part of Unit 3, Area of Study 2. But before we move on, I think there's something you should all know about me. It's that I love McDonald's. And let me say this much, this image makes me want to get into my car, drive straight to the closest Macca's and pick up one of these juicy, tender McChicken burgers. But why? What is it about this image that makes me have that very emotional response? Well, that leads us to our learning intention. By the end of this video, you will be able to identify and analyze the ways in which artists use images to persuade. You'll be able to use this skill in your everyday life too, to unpack and understand how different companies or political figures try to position you to do what they want. But before we move on to that, there's a slightly more pressing matter at hand. It's that an image will be in the argument analysis section of the exam. Right, we know that for a fact. There will be one, possibly many. And it is absolutely pivotal that you have the skills to effectively analyze these images. Because, as I've written here, if you do not incorporate a discussion of the image into your argument analysis essay, then it will be exceedingly difficult to attain a high mark in this section of your exam. Having said that, image analysis is a skill. So if you practice it, I assure you, you will get better. To help facilitate this, I propose the use of a very clear and straightforward method called FAB. It stands for Face, Action, Background. This is a fabulous framework that can really elevate the quality of your image analysis. Now, the first step towards effectively analysing an image is to just take a step back and to ask yourself, what's actually happening here? And this is where we call on FAB. Face, Action, Background. FAB, the fabulous framework. So who are the characters? Start with their face and then look at the rest of their body. What are they doing? Well, what's their action? And what is in the background? Now, by stepping through the image in this way, slowly and carefully, we can ensure that we understand it, which is crucial for developing sound analysis. Far too often, this is just where students stop. They describe what's in the picture and then pack up and go home. However, the next phase is where we make our money. It's where we unpack the specific decisions the artist has made to convey their argument or the meaning. Now, this requires you to ask yourself, why do we get this impression of the characters? Again, the why is underlined for a reason. How do we know what the characters are doing? How do we know what is happening in the background? In the same way that writers intentionally choose words, artists are equally deliberate in the decisions they make. I understand this is all theoretical at the moment, but just stick with me because we're about to apply this model or this framework to a couple of different images, both of which are on sharp culling. Now, before we work through each of these images, try to pause the screen and have a go yourself. So, ask yourself, what's happening here? I told you it's on the topic of sharp culling, but is it for or against? Let's see if we can work it out. FAB, face, action, background, a fabulous framework. So starting with the face of the shark, well, boy oh boy, he looks scary and he looks angry, doesn't he? In fact, he's actually sort of the only face we see, except for a blend of blurred faces up there on the pier. Right, now we move on to action. We see sharks heading towards the humans on the pier, and we also see people holding a sign saying, "We love sharks." There seem to be protesters. The whole image actually seems to be trying to convey the idea that even though the protesters are desperate to save sharks, they have no idea how dangerous the sharks truly are. Fantastic. We have now applied FAB to work out what is happening in this image. But is that enough? No. Remember, as I said before, this is where a lot of students just stop and go home. but we're going to push through. We're going to get those extra marks. So we need to know or start to pinpoint specific components of the image to determine how we actually arrived at this conclusion. So in accordance with FAB, let's start with the face of the shark. So check out the shark's teeth. They're jagged, sharp, disproportionately large for a shark, don't you think? Now this is an obvious decision to accentuate the fact that the shark could eat the humans. The shark also has water coming out of his mouth, or perhaps it could be interpreted as saliva. He's like a drooling dog, which signifies aggression. His eyes too, scary. Now we move on to action. The artist has made the decision to have the shark swim towards the pier, not away. Away would imply they're harmless. Towards means they are ready to eat them. They're a real threat. How about the shark's fins, which are resting on his hips? He's trying to take up more space, trying to assert himself. The shark has also sort of been positioned in relation to the background to illustrate it, the shark, as the powerful one in this image too, don't you think? He's as big as the high-rise buildings, for heaven's sake. So not only does he take up much more room in the image than the protesters in the background, but he's actually sort of even situated above them, looking down on them, which definitely implies that he's in the position of power. The protesters are even in line with his mouth. This is definitely an attempt to try and underscore the idea that the shark's teeth and the humans may very well soon collide. He'll eat them. All right, great. On to the next image. Pause here and have a go by yourself. Remember to use FAB, face, action, background. So, we have a man standing on a pier, yelling at a tiny shark and telling it that it should be killed. We're really made to feel that this is very unreasonable and quite awful. But how has the artist managed to convey this to us? What specific decisions has the artist made when creating the image to position us to feel this way? Let's start with the face of the shark, specifically the shark's sort of cuteness, isn't it? You can't see its teeth, that's for sure. Looks like the shark is even frowning, which implies that it can understand what the human is saying, reinforcing the idea that the animal has feeling. Compare this little pet to the beast of the thing we just looked at. See, this really changes the image, doesn't it? Right, now how about the action, or the lack thereof in this case? The shark is swimming towards the man, like the other sharks were, but in this case it's not trying to eat anyone. The man, in turn, is standing over the shark, saying, "You deserve to be hooked through the mouth and shot." Wow, it would be worth analysing these very evocative words. Dig into that word hooked. That really evokes quite an awful image, doesn't it? It's hard to reconcile this brutal quote with the cuteness of that lovely shark. Why would anyone want to hook such an innocent little thing? Right, now how about the background? There are no other sharks out there, just this one shark. Look at the clouds. They cover the sky, making the image look dim and bleak and reflecting the sadness of the entire scene. Finally, the fact that the man is standing over the shark says a lot too. In the last scene, it was the shark standing over the people, but in this one, the man standing over the shark, which means that he, or we, people, are in the position of power, and that we are the ones who are choosing to slaughter these innocent and vulnerable little creatures. Right, great work. I hope that you can all now see that whilst it is imperative that we try to understand the image, it's not enough to just explain what is happening. Rather, you need to analyze it, unpack it, deconstruct it, pinpoint specific components of the image that the artist has intentionally included to create meaning, to persuade you. My final tip is to look out to see where the image is situated in the article, as it is often placed next to a section of text that reflects its meaning. This won't always be the case, but if it is, and you comment on it, then the markers will be very pleased. Best of luck, everyone.